Well, let's roll right into your review then.
So this month I played Limbo. It is a puzzle platforming game developed by Play Dead, and it was originally published by Microsoft Game Studios for the 360. It was released in 2010 on the Xbox Live. It has been ported by Playdead to other systems, including PS3, Linux, and Windows. It is also on the Xbox One, which is what I was playing it on. It is a 2D side-scroller incorporating a physics engine that governs environmental objects and the player character.
It's so old that it's on the PS3?
Yep.
Wow.
It came out in 2010, so it's middle of 2 generations ago.
Wow.
It still feels weird calling last gen because this gen is last gen 1.0.
Yes.
It's barely there's barely a difference.
Right.
The player guides an unnamed boy through dangerous environments and traps as he searches for his sister. The developer built the game's puzzles expecting the player to fail before finding the correct solution. They called the style of play Trial and Death, and uses a lot of gruesome imagery for the boy's death to steer the player from unworkable solutions. This is a 26 or 27 level or section or phase game. It's all one straight shot all the way to the end. Obviously not everything is loaded right from the beginning, but there are no loading screens or anything like that. You can just keep playing nonstop. There's actually an achievement for completing the entire game in one sitting with under 5 deaths, which I have not nailed yet. I'm working on it. The entire game on my first playthrough took 4 hours or so collectively. The game basically pauses for you. It doesn't, when you close out the game, at least on Xbox One, or the Xbox Series consoles, which play Xbox One games, which is playing a 360 game, when it closes out the game, it immediately brings you back into where you were, kind of like Quick Resume, the current feature, but it just, the game never, I'm assuming because the file size is so small, it's really easy to keep running in the background or whatever, but the game doesn't stop. It just pauses itself for you, so you don't have to reload into your location. It'll stop exactly where you stopped. I played it in 3 or 4 sessions primarily. Get a good chunk done each time before I start getting really frustrated. And exactly like the description says, it's mostly playing for failure. You bounce around going... This game is known for basically being hold right to win, which is not true. This game's actually pretty tricky.
Which I said when you said you were going to review this, but then you've talked about having died several times, so I'm intrigued.
It's not easy. It's not super hard by any means. If you've played a puzzle platformer, you'll probably be able to get through it pretty easily, but it's certainly not you just walk through. It's not a walking sim or the choose your own adventure game where you can't really lose. I probably died a good 100 times on my first playthrough.
Wow.
It's a pretty normal part of the game. You die on a lot of stupid things, for me in particular, especially towards the beginning. It's trying to figure out...
you touched the thorny bush!
Basically. It's the figuring out what the game tells you is dangerous versus what is your imagination playing with the game engine. The entire game is in black and white and shades of gray, so sometimes there are some things which are a little hard to see if it's where in your depth of field it is, whether it's in the foreground or the background, whether it's an interactable element or it's just something that's there. So the first bit can be a little rough, just getting used to the controls and the physics engine, but after that it plays fairly smoothly. It takes trial and error to understand how the parts need to move throughout the different traps and gameplay segments, but it's pretty straightforward. I think now on my what'll be second playthrough, I will probably finish it in about 2 hours. It seems like the internet consensus is between 2 and 5 for first couple of playthroughs. 100% completion is 4 probably. There are, on this version of the game, about 10 Easter eggs. You find them and they literally crunch like eggs that unlock specific achievements on Xbox. And then in the original version of the game, and I believe these were removed on the ported versions, are secrets. There's, I think, about 10 or 15 of them. They're just not something I can access. I kept trying to get to them. I looked up a handful of them, and just none of them were working, so I'm assuming they were removed for the console port, the most recent version. But the Easter eggs were all pretty nice. A couple of them were really easy to find. Like the first one is literally walking to the left at the beginning of the game instead of to the right. You just go into
Classic.
legit just going in the direction the game is telling you not to. That's what most of them are. Only a few of them are obtained by completing a puzzle or something like that. The game is really primarily focused on emotional storytelling, despite the fact that it is a platformer with a character who has no expressions except 2 eyeballs. So your character is fully blacked out. It's a silhouette. He just has 2 blinking white eyes. Most of the other characters, quote unquote, in the game, or more like gameplay mechanics, look the same. There's a giant spider in the game. That's pretty well known. That takes over a couple of segments of gameplay. There's some other people, question mark. There's a lot of creatures that you run around. Some of them are interactable, some of them are not. The game is very open-ended in its premise and also its execution. You can interpret it 1,000 different ways. From sunrise to sunset, it could be literally this boy has plunged himself into limbo to save his sister from an untimely death. Or this is a person searching for companionship throughout their entire life and desperately trying to find some sort of solace in the presence of another person, but never finding one until the end. There's so many ways to interpret it. It just depends on the way you're looking at it. The gameplay is all tight for the most part. There are very few times where I had issues with control. The physics engine is definitely an early, 2010 physics engine, but it works well for what it needs to. There are a lot of interactable elements. There are balls, boulders, dead body parts from various creatures, boxes, lots of boxes, ropes, chains, all sorts of fun stuff. There's a couple of zero gravity or inverted gravity segments. There's a lot of gear switching and gate turning on, and it's a lot of fun stuff. The gameplay just really is straightforward. If you get stuck, if you come back, you'll probably figure it out. Or a game, looking up a guide on the internet will make you go, duh. It's not really that complex. It can just be really difficult to get the timing on. Your deaths reset you back 25% of each chapter. The chapters are all broken up very vaguely. Like I said, it's kind of just one complete narrative from start to finish. So if you die, you might get reset right exactly where you died, or you could get reset, 3 seconds of gameplay back. It just depends on where you end up. The score is phenomenal. A lot of the storytelling, the emotion and atmosphere is done through the musical score and the sound effects. The traps are very loud and abrasive. You have saws, bear traps, spike pits, boulders, all sorts of fun stuff. And they're all very loud, and they cut through the sound mix very effectively. It's a very auditory-based game. Your just general pitter-patter of feet is always present. It changes depending on what surface you're on, basic stuff. When you step on grass, it sounds different than when you step on metal. But when you're jumping into this really, say, a segment that's all in a big metal contraption, and you're just hearing the reverb of your echoing footsteps on this massive behemoth of a machine with nothing else living there, it gets pretty depressing. It's very fun, though, despite the fact that it has a very depressing overtone, especially when backed up by the musical score. The fun factor is definitely there. I like puzzle games. I like side-scrollers. They're not my favorite thing in the world. Everyone grew up playing frickin' Mario, so everyone has a bit of familiarity with a platformer, but I tend to like these sub-10-hour, $5 indie game side-scroller things. They're kind of a weakness of mine. This game, I believe, originally launched for somewhere around $20. I bought it for $5 on a sale on the Xbox One/Xbox Series X storefront. It's been up for free for games with gold multiple times from what I'm aware of, and probably with the PlayStation free games as well. Like I said, it's a 12-year-old game, but it holds up very well. The resolution is nice. It's crisp visually as well as control-wise. The presentation is very tight. There isn't much there. I wouldn't say bare bones, but it is certainly made by an independent studio of probably 10 people.
It's simple.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the simplicity. I think I only rage quit once. There was just one trap that was really kicking my ass. It just was not working. But that was when I discovered that the game picks up right where you left. So that was my first playthrough. I got through probably 8 sections in my first jump, and then section 8 or 9 was just kicking my butt. And then when I came back the next day, I was like, oh, it's right where I am. It didn't, there is no save file or most recent checkpoint that the game tells you anyway. It's obviously they're checkpoints, but I liked it quite a lot. The environmental storytelling was nice. It's spooky. It's not too in-depth. That is something which I think a lot of platform puzzle games can kind of get a little full of themselves. Something like the Ori games are very nice. They have the same sort of simplicity to them, but something like Super Meat Boy, which I do really like, those games that are really difficult can get really full of themselves, and sometimes it just becomes like nearly impossible to beat. They're convolutedly, like, you have to watch walkthroughs of professionals playing them to figure them out, and that's something I strongly dislike. Not that Cuphead got that rough, but Cuphead led to a bit of a resurgence of that type of side-scroller, where it's like, you have to play this 1,000 times to get it right. It's really tricky. You're going to look on the internet. I like being able to figure it out on my own, and this game allowed me to do that with minor exceptions here and there.
This was the precursor to Inside, right?
It is. Inside was released 6 years later. It is the successor to Limbo. I don't know if it's the same team or the same developer, but it is at least a... Okay, it is another Play Dead game, yes.
Do you have intentions on playing that one next or soon?
Maybe not next or soon, but definitely on my list.
Interesting.
Another side-scrolling puzzle game is always welcome in my book. So for buying this for $5, probably like a year ago, it's been sitting in my downloadable library for ages, and providing a week's worth of fun, 3 or 4 game sessions. Definitely worth it. Recommend it. It's fun. There isn't much else to it, and I appreciate that.
Excellent. Would you buy the soundtrack?
Maybe. If I could find it on disc, then potentially. I do have it on other playlists with other things, but I don't know if I would buy it. I don't know if it's good to listen through all the way. I've just listened to certain sections of it.
All right.